on the NewsChannel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hi everybody, Rory Johnston here. Welcome to Open Line on a Tuesday night, the first Tuesday in the month of June already. It is June, and we are glad you have joined us tonight. We hope that you will take advantage and call in tonight. 737+ is the phone number. We're going to talk about a really important subject tonight, and that is black homicides, and specifically here in Tennessee, in the state of Tennessee, in a recent report that ranked us very, very highly. A very discouraging report that we're going to go over. But first, we want to welcome our guest who's going to talk about this and talk about gun violence and much more. And that is Beth Joslin Roth. Thank you for being here, Beth. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
After a long day, she's coming in. She is the policy director for the Safe Tennessee Project. And first, we want to talk about that group a little bit and what they do. So tell us a little bit about the Safe Tennessee Project.
Sure. So the Safe Tennessee Project is a gun violence prevention organization. We view the issue of gun violence as a public health issue, more so than a political issue. We believe in studying the issue and putting forth evidence-based, data-driven policies and programs in an effort to try and reduce gun violence here in Tennessee.
I have to mention, just today, I don't know, I'm sure you saw, the governor of Virginia came forward very strongly after the shootings there in Virginia Beach, and he's calling a special session.
Yes.
Bringing lawmakers back. He's calling it, from what I remember, they're going to be the second responders.
Yes.
He wants some action. He says he's tired of the thoughts and prayers. He wants to see some action. That is the political side of it, taking steps legally in the state of Virginia. Right away, what's going to happen is the political argument heats up. And looking at some of the background of the Safe Tennessee Project, right off the bat, I see here, we respect the Second Amendment. We do not advocate confiscating guns. And yet, I know when you start talking, when you just start going there, I know how powerful the NRA and other lobby groups are, and I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying they are. They're very powerful. Their members feel very, very strongly. How do you get through and communicate with that side about gun violence and some of the steps, which we're going to talk about? Because it says also, you want to seek common ground. Really, if you're going to make any change, you have to seek common ground. And again, you said support evidence-based policies that can reduce the number of families torn apart by gun violence. We can all agree that gun violence is destructive.
Right. First, I'd like to just point out that what we know from polling data is that actually a lot of NRA members themselves support what we would refer to as common sense gun law reforms. It's primarily the NRA leadership that really drives more of the hard line on these issues. But of course, they're the ones that fund the lobbyists and sort of push these types of laws and sort of give us the most pushback. But why
do you think that is? I mean, most gun owners, the ones I know, are very responsible and lock their guns up, and they go to the gun range and they're trained, and their children know the do's and don'ts.
Absolutely, and I mean, we have a number of members of our group who are gun owners themselves, veterans, members of law enforcement, who take the responsibility of being a gun owner very seriously. The NRA has, on the one hand, yes, they are advocates, they would say, for the Second Amendment, but it's also important to note that most of their board of directors they run firearm companies, they run ammunition, they're ammunition manufacturers, so there is sort of a money piece to it that's important to consider. So I think you can't really separate that completely out of the motivations that they have to push for more guns, more places, because that means more gun sales.
So Safe Tennessee, it's a grassroots group. How do you go about advocating? I know you gather data, you have discussions. the group go about spreading this message?
Well, what we try and do is really study the issue as it pertains specifically to Tennessee. So we look at data and statistics relative to our state, whether that data is related to firearm mortality in general, homicide specifically, firearm suicide specifically, unintentional shootings, whatever. We try and provide that specific data here in Tennessee. And what we also look at, as I said, we look at this through a public health lens. And so as a public health researcher, what you want to do is sort of look for trends. You want to try and see if there is something that may be correlating to rises or decreases in gun violence and firearm mortality. Unfortunately, we don't see decreases. We just continue to see these increases pretty much in most all of the categories.
How do you gather these statistics? Because I know from a journalistic standpoint, it's very difficult when the TBI releases numbers, and then local metro police departments throughout the state might release some numbers, and you have different agencies and groups releasing numbers all the time.
Right.
You have to sift through a lot of that to see what is the most accurate, what is this data based on? Right,
and that's a very good point, and really that speaks to kind of a larger frustration that gun violence prevention researchers struggle with, which is the lack of federal funding for firearm research.
Right.
So there is not a single source per se that generates all of this data that we can all agree on. So we are left to source out the data from what we feel are reliable sources.
Sure.
So sometimes, like the data in the report that we're going to be talking about later, that came from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, their supplemental homicide report, which comes from the FBI. But a lot of the data that we use comes from the CDC. They track all firearm mortality, and we run reports and determine specific data relative to homicides, suicides, unintentional shootings. You're able to use the CDC's database to sort of slice and dice that data however you would like, by race, by age, by gender, and all of that kind of helps us make a more informed theories on why we think this is happening and which groups are more disproportionately affected in which ways.
Do you lobby lawmakers?
I don't.
And what kind of influence? How do you get their ear?
Well, I would not really call myself a lobbyist. We really see our role as more of that as of educators. We try and compile all this data and bring it to policymakers in hopes of helping them make more informed policy decisions. It is not easy, as you can imagine. When I first got into this work, I thought that just compiling all this information in a format that would be easy to understand and read might change people's minds on some of these issues. And in retrospect, I realized that was a very naive assumption to make. It was frustrating because I am a person who relies very much on data, on numbers, more so than emotions and opinions. But that's unfortunately not always an effective way to persuade people.
Especially in a red state.
In a red state where the NRA, as you alluded to earlier, has a lot of control.
737 plus, we've got some callers coming in right now, and we'd love to hear your opinion on this as we go through some of these statistics, and we will dive a little deeper into this specific report that ranks Tennessee 8th in the nation for Black homicide victimization. That is much more specific. We're going to kind of start broad and funnel down to this report. Some of the statistics, this is from your group's website. Memphis, Knoxville, and Nashville have all broken homicide records in recent years. Nashville has seen a 160% increase in homicides over the past 5 or 6 years. Tennessee, 11th in the nation for death by firearm for all intents, 7th for homicide only. Again, that's from the CDC. 3rd most dangerous state according to violence crime data from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Uniform Crime Report. That's disheartening.
It is disheartening, and really what I find incredibly frustrating is that there doesn't really seem to be a real interest in even acknowledging this problem that we have in our state. I fully recognize there are a lot of challenges that our state faces right now, and I don't know that you can really necessarily prioritize one over the other. I mean, we certainly have problems with opioid addiction. That's a big issue, but gun violence is a real problem that we have, and as you just went over those statistics, I mean, they're very sobering. And the fact that we know that we have this problem, and we also know that there are ways that we can work to reduce those numbers, and yet we're not doing anything, is frustrating.
All right, 737+ is the phone number. We would love to hear your opinion. What do you think is causing this? What is the root behind this? Is it the guns? Is it something more? We'd love to hear your opinion. You can also ask questions of our guests. Let's go to line 1. I believe David's there. Hey, David.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Roy. Good evening to your cast. First of all, I like you, and I basically like Channel 5. But how dare you put blacks as if we're the #1 culprit as far as our ranking? Based on 2015 U.S. Department of Justice stats, Tennessee was the #1 most dangerous state in the country. Last year, we were #4. This year, we need to pat ourselves on the back because we're #5. Most of the states had an order: New Mexico #1, Alaska #2, Louisiana 3, Arkansas 4, Tennessee 5, South Carolina 6, Alabama 7, Arizona 8, Oklahoma 9, and Missouri 10. Most of everything that you see basically says the South is the most dangerous place to be. Also, most of those states that I have listed are red states by conservatives who believe in tough crime, being tough on crime. Most of the crimes that happen in Tennessee, if you break down the numbers, it's hate crimes. We have more hate crimes against other people of race, and when you look at the makeup and crunch the numbers of black population in the state of Tennessee, you just can't say it's the blacks that are making us, bringing us down.
No, and that's
a lot of hate on Muslims, Sikh, Sudanese, and on and on. And I just cannot stand to see, as far as black homicide, let's talk about white homicides and white kids shooting up other white kids. Let's talk about that, and I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
All right, David, thank you for your call and your concern. Let me see, let me put that there. Your thoughts?
Well, I understand what David was saying, and I hope that that we can be clear. This report is an annual report that the Violence Policy Center puts out. It's in no way designed to put the blame on any one race or the other. It's basically sort of drawing attention to the fact that there are a disproportionate number of African American men, women, and children that are affected by homicide, and really the report is more of a call to action, not an effort to blame anyone, but a call to action to address the issue and to look at the driving forces behind it and the policies and programs that might be effective in reducing it.
Yeah, this is the lead line, David, if you're still listening. I hope you are, to this report from the Violence Policy Center. Tennessee has the 8th highest black homicide victimization rate in the nation. That's a rate of 28.41 per 100,000, nearly 40% higher than the national black homicide victimization rate, and it's 5.5 times higher than the overall homicide rate nationwide. That's according to a new analysis, again, by the Violence Policy Center. And again, we're not laying blame here. Just like you said, we're just trying to put a spotlight on the issue, saying this is disproportionately affecting a minority population, big time, and the ripple effects that it has on families and so on, neighborhoods.
Yes, and how it really kind of creates a cycle. And there are a lot of reasons that we think are tied to this level of homicide, and there are things that the drivers of this are. We need better schools. We need better economic opportunities. We need better jobs. I mean, there are a whole collection of things that we need to address. I mean, it's a real systemic issue. It's not just one single issue, but but it's important to really look at it from a holistic point. If you're gonna really
and also to not be afraid to discuss it.
Absolutely.
To put it out there and say, look, this is something that needs to be discussed and debated. And
absolutely. And so, whereas what we see in Tennessee is that, we definitely have a problem with homicide, and not just with black homicide, with all homicide. In fact, what we see roughly is about 60% of the homicide is black homicide, but the other 40% is white homicide. So it's really not even, a huge difference. But, where we might see a majority or, 60% African American homicide. Another side of this coin is firearm suicides, which disproportionately affect older white men. And we see, what we see there is that that's almost completely related and just tied to white men, mostly in rural areas. So that's that's another issue that we have to look at when we're looking at gun violence as a whole.
We're going to take our first break, everybody. We've got another caller coming in, and we hope you'll call in as well. We'd love to hear from you. Open line will continue right after this.